Begin recording, we'll go ahead and start.
All right, the recording has started.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first online brown bag presentation of this academic year here at Rockford University. I'd like to start with a few thank yous. First of all, to Rockford University for supporting the series, for everyone here from the university, but also to everyone who is joining from near and far. We have friends, we have students, we have colleagues, and some people that we're meeting professionally for the first time. So this is a wonderful way of doing it. And thank you everyone for supporting the series. I'd also like to quickly also thank the Rockford University Coleman Library and its staff. Over the last couple of years, they have hosted the Brown Bag series presentations in person, and without them, frankly, Kelly James and her staff, without them, we actually wouldn't be here today, so online. So I'd like to bridge from last year to here, in person to online. We're all in this together, and thank you all for supporting the series. Also to the Advancement Office for hosting the series online, to Nicole Riley and to Vice President Stephen Cole for allowing this to happen in this way. Wonderful. So a couple of notes. We are going to mute everyone while Professor Erdem is speaking, but once I open up the Q&A period, everyone can manage their mute buttons as we go. If you have a question, unmute yourself. And the way that we usually do this, we'll have a 20 to 25 minute presentation and then about the same amount of time for questions. So I'll keep time, but Professor Erdem is aware, roughly around 12:30, 12:25, we'll go ahead and transition to questions. Okay, any questions before we begin? Okay, so Dr. Orhan Erdem is an Associate Professor of Finance at the Puri School of Business at Rockford University. Previously, he worked as the head of research of the research department at Borsa Istanbul, which is the Istanbul Stock Exchange. He has 10 years of experience in academia and taught at several universities in 3 continents, like Texas A&M University in Commerce, the University of Texas at Dallas, Bilgi University in Istanbul, Turkey, Universidad Europea de Madrid. He earned his PhD degree in economics from the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona in 2008 and holds a BS degree in physics from Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. Principal areas of research include investor psychology, credit risk, and behavioral aspects of credit markets. He has 3 books published. His latest book, After the Crash, analyzes the ongoing effects of the 2008 Great Recession. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Erdem today.
Thank you, Marilyn. So this presentation is basically going to be a summary of my latest paper, which is entitled Freedom and Stock Market Performance During Covid-19 Outbreak. It's going to be a non-technical summary. The paper's idea is to tie the freedom of countries to their COVID-19 data. So is there a relationship between those two? It's just because the reliability of COVID-19 has been discussed heavily since the beginning of pandemic. So what struck me most about COVID-19 toll is that a group of countries, mostly less free countries, had consistently announced a lower toll than others, and I will show you in a moment. So I went ahead and drew this graph, this chart. So this chart basically shows you the connection between freedom score of countries and their number of deaths per million. So I use deaths per million just because some countries are very crowded, like United States, some countries are less crowded, like Greece. So deaths per million would be a fair measure of comparison. So please pay attention to this graph. I will show you a couple of things. So on the x-axis, you see number of deaths per million. On the y-axis, here is the freedom score. So freedom score is an index which is between 0 and 100, and it is created by Freedom House. It's a US-based NGO. So they conduct research and advocacy on democracy and political freedom. So here, the interesting thing about this graph is, so when you kind of look at those freedom scores, so the higher the freedom score, so it's between 0 and 100. So 100 is the most free country and 0 is the least free country. Okay, so when you pay attention to this graph, so these countries, for example, okay, look at those countries. So these countries are less free countries, okay? And the blue ones are more free countries. So these are more free countries. Okay. So when you look at the less free countries, they have not announced even like number of deaths per million. Their number of deaths per million is not even higher than like 300 or 250. These countries, they announce really huge amount of death tolls, and they are mostly free countries, as Spain, United Kingdom, Andorra, Belgium, San Marino, etc. And even Sweden, so it's their freedom score is 100. So what basically strikes me in this graph is mostly free countries have been announcing real high death tolls. So the question, a couple of questions comes to mind. Is it like their health system is bad, so they cannot cope with this death, or is it there's a kind of manipulation among the data? But anyways, this is something that I would answer later on, but this is the problem. So this graph shows me my main problem, and I realized it around like February and March. I said like there should be something going on here. I should go and check it. So what I did in this paper is I divided the countries into two groups, like free countries and non-free countries. So as I told you, the freedom score is something between 0 and 100. So 81 is the median number. So it's the freedom score of the country, which is exactly in the middle of the whole list. Okay. So a country, I'm going to announce it as a free in this research if its freedom score is higher than 81, and it's going to be non-free if its freedom score is less than 81. So from now on, please keep this in mind, this definition. Okay. So this is another chart. Again, is very striking. So this chart shows you COVID-19 cases per million in time, okay? And the blue line shows you the free countries. So when you look at the free countries, my main problem, which I showed you in the previous chart, still continues here. It's like the blue chart, the blue line has always been higher than the red line. So blue line is COVID-19 cases of free countries, and the red line is COVID-19 cases of non-free countries. And currently, as the end of August, this number is around 5,000, almost 4,700, average of all free countries. And the other number is non-free countries is around 3,000. Okay, this is the other number. Okay, maybe it's number of deaths. Is it all? No, that's not all. Let's look at this graph now. This is number of deaths, okay, per million. Now the difference is even like wider. There's a huge gap here. So number of deaths announced by free countries are almost like 4 times higher than the other one. Okay, so number of deaths per million is around 43 right now. It is around 173 in free countries, and it's not only today. It has been always higher since March that they are announcing higher death tolls. So, okay, so these 3 graphs kind of illustrates my problem. So there is something going on with with the COVID-19 data. Is it like freedom of countries that just like kind of prevents them to announce the data, or they're like manipulation in the data, or maybe their health system is bad, okay? Well, I checked a couple of literature from economics and finance journals, and there has been I think a kind of consensus that there's a problem, because this is economist journal, The Economist. So they came up with this brilliant idea of excess deaths, okay? So what they do here is, okay, forget about the numbers, just try to get the main idea of what's going on. There are tons of numbers here, but they came up with this brilliant idea of excess deaths, okay? So excess death is, what they do is, to take the number of people who die from any cause in a given region and period right now, and then compare it with the recent historical average of last 5 years. So they look at the last 5 years of data, number of deaths, and they look at now. So if there's a difference, then that difference should be attributed to a reason. And we all know what that reason is. That's COVID-19, so coronavirus. But that's not it exactly. Please pay attention to Mexico City right now, okay? Mexico City's excess deaths is, maybe I should make it red. Okay, so these excess deaths between August 5 and August 8 this year is 29,000. Okay, so 29,000 people died on top of the average of last 5 years. And we know the reason. They might probably died because of coronavirus, but no. What they announced coronavirus deaths is around 9,000. So what happened to these 20,000 people? I mean, they died from flu, they died from, so normal causes kind of do not explain the difference between those two numbers. Once again, so the higher the difference between excess deaths and COVID-19 deaths, the higher the suspicions of the data of that country, okay? So there's a kind of question mark here. So what happened to those 20,000 people? And look at Peru, for example, there's almost like, again, 35,000 people. These are like the dates are different, but the idea is always the same. And Ecuador and Rio de Janeiro, again, it comes to my original question. So these countries are mostly non-free countries. And by the way, Chicago Tribune, I think, they kind of made the news, they prepared the news a couple of weeks ago about what's going on in Illinois, which is our state. So they said the same thing is happening in Illinois, and they reported excess deaths for Illinois too, but I'm not going to go into the detail. My main question is still, is there a relationship between freedom of countries and their announced death tolls or cases tolls of COVID-19? Something is something preventing them from announcing those numbers? Well, I will pause here for a moment and I will tell you a story. Okay, that story belongs to 35 years ago, almost. So on January 29th of 1986, around noon, around 12 p.m., the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded almost 73 seconds into its flight, almost a minute after the flight. Well, President Reagan, he established a commission called Rogers Commission by executive order, and an impressive team of 14 people, two of whom you will see here, Richard Feynman and Neil Armstrong. Everybody knows Neil Armstrong in the world. And Richard Feynman is the Nobel Prize winner in physics. He's a brilliant physicist, he died. So a brilliant and impressive team of 14 people worked to find the cause of the explosion. Well, they worked almost 6 months until, so the disaster happened in January. The commission was established a couple of days after that. So they almost worked 5 or 6 months until June, to find the reason of the cause. Okay, the cause of the explosion, And they concluded that the explosion was caused by something infamous called O-rings. So they were like O-rings of the space shuttle. So they found the reasons. It was because those O-rings, they cannot stretch and they cannot kind of close the whole of one tank anyway. So the details are important, not important, but anyways. So the explosion, the cause of the explosion was because of those O-rings, okay? So 4 major contractors were involved in the space shuttle program. The first one is Lockheed, second one is Martin Marietta, third one is Morton Tickle, and the fourth one was Rockwell International. Okay, so the commission's report was released, but the release of the commission report was only bad news for only one of those companies, which is Morton Tickle. So those O-rings were produced for Morton Tickle, and so that was the cause of the disaster. Now, I will pause again for telling another story. So stock markets are mostly a merciless place in how they react to news, okay? So investors buy and sell shares depending on whether the news is good or bad, or there's a rumor. So the markets will generally incorporate the news into the prices of publicly traded companies. So good news are rewarded, bad news are punished, and rumors often have just as much impact as news. So there's good news, there's bad news, and there's rumors, okay? So my question here to you is, just think for a moment. So guess how much it took for the stock market to incorporate the Challenger disaster into stock prices. So it took 6 months, once again, to summarize everything. So it took 6 months, around 6 months, for the committee to find the cause of the disaster. My question is, how about the stock market? Well, a month, a week, 2 months, 3 months, days. The answer is minutes, okay? So this graph, you see the stock prices of 4 contractors I mentioned here, okay? Morton Tickle, Lockheed, Martin Marietta, and Rockwell. And only this is the stock price of these squares, these black squares are the stock price of Morton Tickle. Only 10 minutes after the disaster happened, Morton Tickle's stock price plummeted, okay? So once again, what took Rogers Commission with some of the finest minds on the planet 5 or 6 months to establish, the stock market was able to do within a few minutes and maybe hours, just an hour at most, okay? So what I'm trying to tell here is that stock markets can be used to track the source of the problem. It's mainly because millions of people, millions and millions of people and machines are trying to find the most accurate estimate of prices, which are supposed to incorporate all the news in the world, okay? So now comes my idea. Okay, I have an idea. So freedom of countries, COVID-19, and stock market, okay? My idea is to track the money. So what do investors think about COVID-19 data? That would be my main question. So what did they think and how did they react to news, COVID-19 news? Did they believe it or did they not believe it? Just because of a couple of reasons. One is because mostly they are well-informed people, and secondly, because they care about their money, they have to find the correct information, correct news. Anyway, so this is my data. So I went ahead and downloaded the data of 75 countries. I downloaded their cases per million, as I explained the reason. So it's not cases, it's cases per million, and the deaths per million, okay? This is one data. The other data is their stock market indices. I downloaded from Bloomberg and I calculate their returns. And the third one is Freedom Index, which I explained a moment ago from Freedom House. So I divided the countries into 2 groups, like free countries and less free countries, okay, depending on if their score is higher than or lower than 81. Okay, so I did a very easy correlation analysis. So this correlation shows you numerically what is the relationship between stock market returns and COVID-19 case number increases. So there's a correlation, negative correlation, which makes total sense. The number of cases, when the number of cases increases, the stock market goes down, which makes total sense. This is again number of deaths. When number of deaths increases, stock market goes down, which again makes total sense. This is not the interesting part of my talk, but just pay attention to this because, guys, everybody please. So this is higher than that number, which means number of cases affects the stock markets more than number of deaths. But still, this is not my main point. My main point is, where is this freedom? I mean, how can I kind of connect the freedom with the data that they announce? Okay, so there's a caveat here. When you incorporate freedom, most of the free countries are developed countries. So because if I say, for example, if freedom is associated with a decrease in stock market or less decrease in stock market, people might say, hey, this might stem because most free countries have more complex and efficient financial systems, so it might happen because of their financial system. So I have to control the development of the country. That's what I did exactly. So I'm kind of trying to build my idea, build my case. My case is to build a connection between freedom of countries on one side, their toll announcement on the other side, controlling their wealth. So they should not happen just because they are wealthy or they are rich countries, okay? And there is a tool for that, which I'm not going to go into the detail. It's called penal regression, which might not be something very common to everybody. But anyways, I will summarize my results, but I have to show this anyway. If somebody's interested in the details, you can take a look at my paper. But I will show you a couple of things here. So this is the penal regression results. For those of you who knows this is the growth of cases. This is the growth of deaths. And here I'm controlling the country fixed effects. Now I'm going to summarize you my results based on this panel data regression. I'm skipping this for the moment, but as I said, if somebody is interested, you can take a look at the table. Okay, so here are my results. I have 4 main results, but the most striking one is, I'm sorry. So the most striking one is about the relationship between the freedom of countries and, do you still see my screen, by the way? Kind of something happens to me. Marilyn, can you please tell me if you still see my screen?
I do. I see the screen that says that the heading is panel data regression.
Okay, nothing else?
And table 3.
Okay.
We see table 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just give me a second, please, because my screen is kind of lost.
You might, this just happened to me in a class. You may have to unshare your screen and then share again.
Okay, just give me a sec then. I stopped sharing and I will share once again. Okay, somehow it doesn't accept it anyways. How about now? Do you see a screen saying results?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry for the pause. Okay, I have 4 main results. I will just review them one by one. The first one is not very interesting. So the number of COVID-19 cases per million has significant and negative effects on markets, which is probably guessed by everybody. Okay. I think the second and third one are the most interesting one. The second one is growth of number of cases are 3 times more effective on stock markets than growth of death tolls are. This is still also not the most interesting part. So just because people, when you announce the number of cases, they can predict the number of deaths beforehand, so that might not still be interesting. But anyway, so growth of number of cases are affecting the markets more than growth of death tolls are. Okay, so the third one kind of is the main result of my presentation today. It goes as follows. So even though free countries has been announcing COVID-19 cases 3 or 4 times higher than less free countries, the decrease in stock market returns of free countries is half of the others. Which means, once again, let me rephrase this result. Okay, rephrasing goes as follows. Even though free countries are announcing real high numbers, investors do not react to those numbers as much as they do in less free countries. So, for example, if 2 countries, take 2 countries, one free, one less free, they announce the same exact number of death tolls or number of cases tolls, okay? Investors react almost 2 times as much to less free countries, which means that they are thinking that the number of death tolls they see are kind of tip of the iceberg. So there's something which is not announced, so they don't believe the numbers. This is kind of my interpretation, but that's what I take from this result. Again, even though the growth of number of COVID-19 cases per million increases the volatility in less free countries, it does not have any effect on the volatility of free countries. Volatility is just too much movement in stock markets. Well, these are the formal results, but my interpretation is follows. So investors, even though this is kind of an illustration. So look at the white line shows you S&P 500 index of United States. So this is S&P 500. So the white line, this is S&P 500. The blue line and the purple line, these are Bahrain Stock Exchange and Hungary Stock Exchange, which are associated with less number of COVID-19 death tolls. This kind of illustration, I did not take all the stock markets, but what I'm saying is investors do not react as much to free countries' COVID-19 death toll number announcements. They do not react too much, but they react almost double the amount in less free countries, which kind of can be interpreted, as I said, I think they are believing that the numbers, announced numbers, are not accurate. Okay, so a couple of discussion and conclusion. I'm wrapping up my main point, and then I can take your questions. So the most important thing is some countries might be hiding COVID-19 data, or some institutions, some countries. It's not wise to do that, because if people realize that what the data they see is kind of manipulated, they would lose their trust. Once you lose the trust, it's not easy to get it back. So the price is the trust. So trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair. It's not easy to repair the trust. So what I am recommending here is free markets. Even though they announce higher death tolls, investors do not react to those numbers because they believe that it's accurate. In other countries, they react too much just because I think they are thinking that the numbers they see are not accurate. So this is kind of a way that I discovered to fact check the COVID-19 data. Because we see numbers which are not fact checked. We don't know if they are correct, if they are not correct, but there are millions of the people who are checking those numbers for the sake of their investments. Well, I'm basically done, Marilyn. I tried to make a quick summary of my paper in a non-technical way. I can take questions if there is any.
We have about 20 minutes. We will wrap up at about 10 to 1. So any questions?
Arhan, I have a question. Sorry. Okay.
Who's talking?
Me. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
It's me. So why did you do number of cases versus percentage of population?
Why did I do? Well, why didn't I do?
You did it on numbers of cases, right? Versus percentage of the population with the cases.
It is because so the resource I take is a place called Our World in Data. Just trying to find that page. Okay, so this is the place I took the data from Our World in Data. There are a couple of sources too. So they announced number of deaths, they announced number of COVID-19 cases, and they announced deaths per million. That's why it was a ready data. I did not have to manipulate the data, because when you start doing it, I mean, numbers may not be consistent. So I prefer to use their already calculated data.
Gotcha.
But that's an interesting idea, by the way. I mean, you can do the same thing, as a percentage of people. That might be another interesting. Let's do that, Amy.
Okay. Another question: How did they come up with the Freedom Index? What kinds of things did they ask or look at?
Wow, that's a tough question. To be honest, I don't know the details, but there are a couple of, I think there are three main areas: freedom of expression, political rights, and one more. Okay. So yeah, that's what I remember.
So it wasn't based on economics?
No, I mean, it's mostly used by political scientists.
Oh.
But yeah, I was aware of it because I was interested in the idea.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Very interesting.
That was a place I did not study much. I'm sorry, Amy.
No, I was just curious.
You're a good professor, so you caught my mistake. It's not a mistake, but you caught.
Huh. Wow, that's interesting.
Orhan, I have a question. I don't know if you can't answer it, that's fine. But I was curious, focusing just on the case of America. Do you have a sense of how much investors trust in the numbers being reported in America? I know it's not directly related to your presentation.
Well, it's not. Yes, you're right. As I said, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I can even show you the paper. I scanned it from Chicago Tribune. So they made the case for Illinois, and then they calculated the excess debts that the Economist magazine came up with. So they calculated the excess debts, and they showed that there is a discrepancy between the number of death tolls announced and the number of deaths, excess deaths, happened compared to last year. So there is still a discrepancy in Illinois that number of deaths are not matching. So COVID-19, I don't remember the exact numbers, but say COVID-19 death tolls is around 90, and then they say that there's excess death of 110, for example. So where is this difference? So what happened to those people? They were questioning. I'm pretty sure, I know the economists did the same thing for most of the states. Maybe I can show you. Just give me a sec so that I can find it. It's in my bookmarks. So this is their, okay, this is their excess death tolls. Do you see the economists on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, when you scroll down here, they show the countries first. And then, so these are the countries which I showed you a moment ago: Mexico City, Peru, Ecuador, etc. And they did the same thing for United States. So these are the states. Okay, so the red line shows the excess deaths, and the kind of shaded area, purplish shaded area, is showing the COVID-19 cases. For example, look at New York. So it is, for example, around June, it was 33 COVID-19 cases per million. No, not per million, it's per 100,000 people. But the excess death is around like 48. So for most of the states, New York, New Jersey, there's kind of this discrepancy, like the difference, a lot of difference. But for those countries, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, so for some of them there's not huge difference, but for some others there is really huge difference between the numbers. You can even take a look at Illinois, which I'm not sure if it's here or not. Anyways, what I'm saying is this excess debt is calculated for, I think, all of the states, and there is, yes, a discrepancy, a difference. Did I answer your question at least partially?
I think so. What accounts for the discrepancy specifically? Do you know, like how are they coming up with that? They're looking at all these deaths and determining which ones are definitively due to COVID-19 and others question mark? Is that what that discrepancy number shows?
Yeah. If there's a difference, they attribute it to kind of unexplained question mark, suspicious number of deaths. So, for example, take a look at New Jersey. So they say that the excess deaths per 100,000 people is 36 compared to last 5 years. But the COVID-19 death toll is around 21. So there's 15 people per 100,000 in that state, which is kind of suspicious. So we don't know the reason, okay?
Yeah.
It is above, by the way, like last 5 years average, okay? So we take last 5 years as average as a benchmark. So 0 is the point kind of representing the last 5 years average. If it is the same number, then there's no excess death. But there's obviously an excess death here, okay, for all of the states. But most of the states, they do not attribute it to COVID-19. Whose reason, I'm not sure.
Yeah, be good to know. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it might be in different studies. So which states are more transparent than others? Maybe. Okay, it might be different research.
Can I add to that thought? This is
Sure.
Deepshika.
Sorry, Deepshika.
I think from what I listened to and read, some of these excess deaths that are not attributed to COVID-19 are indirect deaths related to COVID-19 in the sense that because hospitals were overwhelmed and they were not taking in regular, other kinds of diseases like chronic diseases, diabetes, and things like that. Some of these excess deaths are not COVID-19 deaths, but are attributed to those additional factors. If everything was normal, these deaths would not have happened, but since COVID-19 kind of overwhelmed the system, those deaths, untagged deaths, so to say.
Yeah, this is a plausible explanation. But what I did is basically maybe fact-checking the same thing from stock markets point of view, believing that stock markets incorporate all the news as much as they can, considering that there are millions, if not billions, of investors around. Thank you, Deepshika.
Orhan, I have a question. that was a great presentation, but it raises a question for me about the relationship between investor confidence and their confidence in the ability of the healthcare system in that particular country to respond effectively to not just to COVID cases. So I guess that ties into testing and maybe the recovery rate if there was a way to quantify it. But do you think there's an association between investor confidence and their belief in the ability of the healthcare system to handle the number of COVID cases?
It might be an indirect way. Probably yes, but at the end of the day, what we see in all stock markets is when number of death tolls are increasing, stock markets react in the opposite way. Okay. So my main question is how opposite was that reaction between free and non-free countries? It might be, as you said, you're right. I think it's a great point. It might be because they do not believe the health system, or maybe they do not believe the data. Well, I'm not saying, I said this explicitly. This is from some point on, this is my thought. Okay, it's obvious that they react more, but why they react more is maybe something to think about, maybe time to more extensive and detailed research. But my research so far shows that they do not react the same. But it's not because their financial system or their economy is better because we controlled it. It's because they do not have some confidence, maybe in the health system, maybe in the data, maybe in the government, but obviously they do not have some confidence to something related with that country. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, definitely.
I have a follow-up question on that. Mehmet is Mehmet Orhan. So to what extent do you think what those governments have done in response can also explain this finding?
I think there's a professor from Boğaziçi University, Ceyhun. He did very good research about how countries react. So they compare all the countries' reaction. So for example, United States, President Trump issued a stimulus check a couple of months ago. So some countries did something else. So every single country has their way of dealing with COVID-19. And they wrote a really good research paper comparing the stimulus of countries, how they react to those cases. But it's not part of my research. But that research is really good to maybe to take a look. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. But I mean, but I trust what you're finding here. There may be some other explanations. I mean, at the end of the day, what we observe is probably a function of multiple things.
Sure.
I believe in what you're observing, and there may be some others as well. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, definitely. This is not something finished. Maybe we should continue researching about that. But there's obviously this reality. We can't fact check China. We can't fact check, I don't know, a couple of countries. No way. I mean, they don't reveal the data. I mean, they don't reveal the detail of the data. They say that, hey, this is our death toll. You can't fact check it because the government does not allow you to check it, okay? Does not allow you to go to the hospitals and ask the numbers and then aggregate those numbers and then check if it is true. They don't allow you. So the only thing they can do is just like doing other way around, something like this. Or just, you can't do it directly. You can just like observe something. So what economists did is, it was a brilliant idea. They looked at the last year's death toll and they compared it. That's a brilliant idea. What I did is just look at the stock market. Somebody might come up with a different measure. At the end of the day, we have to show that the data they reveal might not be accurate. Or if that's true, of course. I mean, I'm claiming that they're not accurate. But there might be reasons. Thank you for the advice, by the way. Any other questions?
I have a question, Orhan. I'm wondering, this is Catherine Forsland. I'm wondering if the essential or an essential bottom line to this research, particularly relative to this freedom score, is that the United States is perhaps doing the worst of anybody in the world because freedom here is defined in ways that go beyond the kind of common sense notion of what we need to do as a society to maintain public health.
Are you kind of proposing that we should take a look at different indices, in different freedom score indices? Is that what you are trying to say?
Not necessarily. I'm saying that it looks to me that the freedom score, that this chart in particular indicates that the more free countries are, the higher their case rate and ultimately possibly their death toll, perhaps. I'm not sure about, I'm not sure if the death rate, I'm talking mostly about cases, I guess. But the idea that, in America, I doubt in a lot of other countries you have people walking around saying, you can't make me put on a mask because that violates my freedom. But in America, that's what a lot of people are saying, including some of our political leaders are at least implying that, if not saying it outright. And so to me, it seems like that is working against us in trying to contain things. I mean, this is totally not an economic.
No, I mean, I think you're 100% right. That's a very interesting perspective. Definitely. That might be even a different and interesting research. But this is, I tried to kind of refrain from what, I think Mehmet was asking the same thing. So refrain from what the governments are doing politically. I don't care. I just try to say, hey, this is the death toll United States announced. Okay. Is it right or is it inaccurate? Okay. For example, a couple of weeks ago, President Trump, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he said that we should decrease number of tests so that the death tolls, the case tolls will go down. Okay. So if you do this, you lose the trust of people. Okay. So you might announce like less number of deaths or less number of cases, but then people would not trust you. Okay. But what I'm saying is, if you are living in a quote unquote highly free countries, I mean, people know that that number is true or that number is false. Okay, they know better than the people in less free countries, at least looking at this score. So, did I kind of make my case?
Well, yeah. I mean, from my perspective, how accurate the count is doesn't really matter for the argument that more freedom and people's interpretation of that freedom in a more and more kind of individual sort of way leads to, or potentially seems to lead to, more cases. Even if we just go and we just assume that whatever numbers those governments are giving us are accurate, that seems to me to be what this chart is showing.
Well, thank you. I mean, I appreciate your thoughts. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking all the economics out of it, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I try to refrain from making it economic paper. I just try to make it as non-technical as possible, and your point really makes a lot of sense.
No, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding your point in this graph about how it seems like countries with higher freedom scores have higher deaths per million. And higher freedom scores would be, at least as I understood what you said, countries where the societies are more open and more free and people have more individual freedom.
Yes.
Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comment, by the way, Catherine. It's really valuable. I should continue thinking about those two. I mean, very interesting.
I think it proves something beyond just the economic side. I think it also uses, I think your use of these numbers prove other aspects about what COVID is doing to societies around the world.
Well, yes. I mean, another interesting point is people, not just the countries, even the institutions, they refrain from announcing the exact death tolls. Okay, they say, like they try to kind of manipulate data. They don't announce it. They try to kind of like different ways of not announcing the accurate numbers. What I'm saying here is just don't do that. Okay, people, because these are huge numbers affecting millions of people. You can't like literally hide it. People would somehow realize either they are not accurate. Okay, they can't fact check it, but once they realize that they're not accurate, you would lose the trust. Once you lose the trust, you can't build it. No way. I mean, it takes years, sometimes centuries to build the trust. And then once you kind of destroy the trust, I mean, then the essential reason of that existence of that institution and country becomes obsolete.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
Thank you.
I just feel like that's kind of a little bit about what we're watching play out around us.
But let me say something additional to that. I think we need to be careful about less free countries, because I am sure that, for example, Venezuela is not reporting all the cases, you know, and the government doesn't care about, you know, that information, and they are not reporting the cases. They don't want to do it.
Okay, so if they are not reporting the cases, they are not here. So I'm not sure about the Venezuela. I have to check it. But maybe let me check the paper, by the way. Okay, here's the paper. There's an
No, I made the comment because of Catherine's comment about the free countries. We need to see the other side. You know, some countries that the freedom is less. Maybe they are going to manipulate information. You know, and this is the data. You cannot do about it. You cannot do anything about that. They decide not to do it, or yes, maybe to do it.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, Luis. I don't mean to, I was thinking that this numerical kind of study was another way to show that America's own freedom and the way some people define that freedom is potentially working against us.
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting one. Yes. Catherine, you know what? I think this deserves another research.
Well, I didn't mean, because no, I think what you've got is great, but I think it's got broader implications. So I'm sure you're going to bring that to your.
Well, that's something that I am trying to analyze in my book, After the Crash. I'm saying that after 2008 crisis, authoritarianism has been increasing worldwide, and we should not take democracy and freedom granted. No way. I mean, it kind of deteriorates if you don't just like try to hold it very strongly. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I would argue the exact same thing, that this is about people's participation as citizens and people's recognition or lack thereof, that their actions affect more than just them. Just like saying, oh, my one vote doesn't count. That's not true. Everybody's vote is more than just their vote. It's the people they talk to, the people they influence. Everybody's vote counts for more than just their vote in that kind of broader context. And I think, I think people are they're too much in their own world. And I think that's dangerous, not only here, but in other parts of the world. So.
Orhan, you would have to figure out a way to control for American exceptionalism in your study, and then you'd be fine.
Yeah, well, good luck with that.
I need somebody to help me then. Catherine, you might help me.
Yeah.
On that note,
you ask a question, you have to bear the consequences, Catherine. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm happy to talk to you anytime about it.
Thank you, everyone. We have arrived at the end of our 50-minute period. I know you probably have more questions to ask. Orhan, please send him a message. Orhan, is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
If you'd like to, his email address is oerdem@rockford.edu. I want to thank everyone for your participation today, for your amazing questions, and I'm happy to see that this is hopefully going to open up more lines of research and inquiry. So thank you again for participating.
I thank you too to everybody. Yeah, thank you for joining this conversation. Thank you. Very valuable. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon.
Great work, Orhan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jefe. People are still trying to join the conversation.